Some major news here as far as Trump's attorney is concerned. Jenna Ellis will now have her law license suspended in the state of Colorado. The suspension begins on July 2nd and will last for 3 years. There's also the strong likelihood that other states will also refuse to allow her to practice law, given the news out of Colorado. So if you're wondering whether it was all worth it, probably not. This comes as Jenna Ellis pleaded guilty last year to 1 felony count of aiding and abetting false statements and agreed to cooperate with Fulton County, Georgia prosecutors in their ongoing RICO prosecution of Trump and more than a dozen co-defendants. In exchange for her cooperation agreement, she was sentenced to 5 years of probation and a $5,000 fine, which of course comes on top of her losing her law license for 3 years. Here's what that moment looked like.
Thank you, Your Honor, for the opportunity to address the court. As an attorney who is also a Christian, I take my responsibilities as a lawyer very seriously, and I endeavor to be a person of sound moral and ethical character in all of my dealings. In the wake of the 2020 presidential election, I believed that challenging the results on behalf of President Trump should be pursued in a just and legal way. I endeavored to represent my client to the best of my ability. I relied on others, including lawyers with many more years of experience than I, to provide me with true and reliable information, especially since my role involved speaking to the media and to legislators in various states. What I did not do, but should have done, Your Honor, was to make sure that the facts the other lawyers alleged to be true were in fact true. In the frenetic pace of attempting to raise challenges to the election in several states, including Georgia, I failed to do my due diligence. I believe in and I value election integrity. If I knew then what I know now, I would have declined to represent Donald Trump in these post-election challenges. I look back on this whole experience with deep remorse. For those failures of mine, Your Honor, I have taken responsibility already before the Colorado bar who censured me, and I now take responsibility before this court and apologize to the people of Georgia. Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Ellis, for sharing that all too often. I don't get to hear the perspective of the accused in these cases, and so that's appreciated.
Of course, while I'm sure the waterworks might have been intended to show contrition, let's not pretend for a moment that Jenna Ellis didn't know what she was doing before she ended up in a courtroom. Let's not pretend for a second that any of these Trump-linked attorneys are in the dark about the activities that they're perpetuating and the man for whom they're acting. Donald Trump's criminality is obvious. He is a lifelong con man whose frauds, abuses, assaults, lies, and grifts have been well documented. And him trying to overturn the results of a free and fair election are no different. People like Jenna Ellis might cry now, but they were perfectly content to carry out this kind of behavior when they thought they'd get away with it. She's not upset that she did it, she's upset that she got caught. Which is why, by the way, from my own perspective, while I'm glad that Jenna Ellis is experiencing some degree of accountability with this 3-year law license suspension, 3 years does seem awfully generous for a person who not only helped commit a crime, but used her law license to do it. This is someone whose job it is to uphold the law. It's one thing for a con man like Trump with no law license to do what he's done, but Jenna Ellis's entire job is expressly to abide by our laws, not to break them. She should know better, and so the notion that in 3 years she'll be able to once again go back to practicing the law is a testament to the continued impotence of our judicial system at the hands of these MAGA criminals. Ellis should be able to spend exactly 0 days practicing law for the rest of her life, and if our justice system was up to the task of defending itself, she wouldn't be able to spend a single solitary day of her life representing another client. As for other Trump-linked attorneys, I asked my Democracy Watch co-host Mark Elias whether he thinks these bouts of accountability for folks like Jenna Ellis will have an impact on the willingness of other lawyers to break the law in deference to Trump, and here's what he had to say. Do you think the fact that even a 6-3 conservative Supreme Court, the fact that they're not willing to swoop in and save Sidney Powell and Lin Wood and these other election subverters, is that going to have an impact on other attorneys who may be looking to do the same thing in 2024?
So I think it depends. I think it depends. And I think that for some lawyers on the right, it will. For some lawyers on the right, they are going to be worried that they could be sanctioned, that they could be disbarred, they could be subject to bar proceedings, and that will be enough to dissuade them. But there is always, as we have learned with Donald Trump, there is always another group behind them who is willing to push further and further and further and to celebrate pushing further and further and further. And in some ways, it makes my job as a courtroom lawyer easier as their lawyers get worse and crazier.
Yeah.
But it subverts democracy, and it raises the stakes for the 2024 elections higher and higher when more irresponsible people, including irresponsible lawyers, get more and more authority and power in his orbit. Because as much as you and I can joke about the Kraken and all the rest of it, how close did Sidney Powell come from actually having the authority of the United States government? How close did Jeffrey Clark come to actually being the acting attorney general? How close did Kash Patel, another lawyer, I might add, how close did he come to being put in a position in control of our national security apparatus, right? Each of those things were all in play in that period of time after 2020. And as we head towards 2024, anyone who thinks that the stakes are not enormous, anyone who thinks this is just about some disbarred lawyers or some old cases from 2020, they are missing the forest from the trees. Donald Trump wants to bring these kinds of lawyers into government because he wants to bring these kinds of people into government.
Perfectly put. And here's what Mark had to say more broadly about the state of Trump's attorneys as of now. Can you give kind of a comprehensive rundown of what the outlook has been for Donald Trump's whole slew of attorneys these last few years?
So, I mean, look, they've had a rough go of it, right? I mean, you have Jenna Ellis, who obviously was Jenna Ellis, interestingly, seems to be the most contrite among them.
Yeah.
You know, I give her that. Like, she seems to have some genuine contrition.
Well, there may be something. There may have been something for her while standing in front of the judge in that Georgia courtroom where suddenly the reality of her life dawned on her in that moment.
Yeah. And then we have other lawyers who have been indicted in Georgia, along with her. She showed contrition as part of her plea. We saw less varying degrees of contrition among others. We have seen Republican lawyers ensnarled in the fake electors criminal cases. Probably, though, the one that I think will stick with history the longest is what happened with Rudy Giuliani. Rudy Giuliani went from being a very successful big city mayor, the mayor of New York, viewed as a hero of 9/11, and through his association with Donald Trump, and only through his association with Donald Trump, he ruined his career. He ruined his legal career. He is now in financial tatters, having declared bankruptcy. And he is a laughingstock among all of the people who once admired him. And my message to the lawyers who are working for Donald Trump now is this: Donald Trump is not standing by Rudy Giuliani. Donald Trump has washed his hands of Rudy Giuliani. So Rudy Giuliani, who made himself an object of ridicule and disgust in the American public, and who gave everything, his livelihood, his reputation, everything to Donald Trump, got repaid by Donald Trump walking away from it.
And the only thing worse than the Jenna Ellis's and Rudy Giuliani's of the world is that there are still, to this day, attorneys who will contract every ounce of their power to Donald Trump, knowing what he does, knowing how he's left everyone else out to dry, because they think that they're special, that it won't happen to them, that Donald Trump actually cares about them. He doesn't. And just like every other attorney and staffer and aide, they will all end up under the bus because the only person who Donald Trump cares about is Donald Trump. I've got a really exciting announcement. I've written a book. It's called Shameless. This book explores how Republicans have exploited their historical branding while attacking our democracy, how the media has proven itself a willful participant, and how Democrats can learn from this to rebalance the political scales and save our democracy. It has been a lifelong dream of mine to write my own book, and so I'd like to ask you to pre-order it by clicking the link right here on the screen. And if you buy within this pre-order period, your book is going to come with a signed nameplate. As you know, I've never had a single sponsor on my channel. I don't ask for money or anything like that. But if you're looking for a way to support me, this is hands down the best way to do it. So again, follow the link right here on the screen, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for pre-ordering Shameless. And as always, make sure to subscribe to see more of my content.